A Message to the Youth is an essay by Julius Evola that was published in 1950 and later compiled into a book titled A Handbook for Right-Wing Youth by Hungarian traditionalists. In it, Evola stresses the importance of individual improvement for those seeking to combat the poisons of modernity. Moreover, he also outlines the issues with 4 particular subversive ideas and charts a path forward on the individual level for youth born after the war. Beginning with the first paragraph, Evola rejects the idea that we are in a purely political struggle and chastises those who believe so as having learned nothing from the past. He argues that a higher quality of human must accompany any political formulas or system if the West is to be saved. Without an internal fortitude and sense of discipline, no man may hope to be an adversary of modernity, even if he has a grounded political ideology. To quote Evola, "Not letting oneself go is what is crucial today. In this society gone astray, one must be capable of the luxury of having a character. One ought to be such that, even before being recognized as a champion of a political idea, one will display a certain conduct of life, an inner coherence, and a style consisting of uprightness and intellectual courage in every human relationship. All this in a straightforward manner, with no exhibitionism, big words, or puritanical attitudes." Put another way, it is not sufficient to exhibit correct belief. One must also demonstrate correct action. On the surface, this may not sound very profound, but if a man reflects upon his daily routine honestly, then I am certain he can find some example of himself not behaving like the Evolian higher man. By becoming cognizant of one's faults, a person then has the opportunity to correct them and align correct action with correct belief. This is the meaning of improving one's character, and Evola wishes for the youth specifically to understand this. I will share a personal anecdote of how this teaching has impacted my life later on in the video, but for now, we will continue on to the next part of the essay. Evola observes that modernity has brought with it many bad ideas that degrade a civilization and produce extreme amounts of human suffering. Today in 2024, this is especially pronounced, but in 1950, when Evola was writing, the necrosis was in an earlier stage. Consequently, the 4 subversive ideas Evola rails against in this essay may seem, from our perspective, rather tame, but to ignore them on these grounds would nevertheless be unwise. In the order Evola mentions them, these are Darwinism, Marxism and Socialism, Psychoanalysis, and Existentialism. In another video on Evola's essay titled Orientation's 11 Points, I have quoted at length Evola's argument against each of them, but to recap why Evola opposes them so vehemently, let us now visit each in turn. Against Darwinism, Evola charges that it diminishes the fundamental dignity of the human person. Darwinism is materialistic and sees humanity as just another kind of animal, subject to beastly and primitive dispositions. But Evola argues that this view downplays what separates man from beast, while totally rejecting the spiritual value inherent in a human person. Against Marxism and Socialism, Evola charges that they are hyper-focused on economics and class stratification. The Marxists are mistaken because economics is not and has never been the fundamental driver of history. While he does not mention this in this particular essay, it is also important to mention that Evola opposes the materialism and egalitarianism which are inherent to Marxist ideology. Against psychoanalysis, Evola rejects the idea that we are slaves to our subconscious and contends that humans retain autonomy and sovereignty over the human mind and sexuality. In Evola's perspective, psychoanalysis robs us of our sense of agency, and as a consequence, causes us to eschew responsibility for our actions. Finally, against existentialism, Evola criticizes it on the basis that it leads to an individual wallowing in a kind of self-sadism, and that it cuts off a person from the meaning to be found in anchoring one's life purpose to something transcendent and greater than himself. Put together, these 4 ideas constitute metaphorical poisons that inhibit individuals from rising to their utmost potential. To quote Evola, "It is impossible to rise as long as we remain under the influence of such false and deviant ways of thinking. Once free from the poison, we can attain clarity, uprightness, and real strength. Let us repeat this. Inner action must precede all other action." Let this especially be perceived by those youth who retain a spark within themselves, so that they may pick up the torch from those who have not yet fallen. Evola then goes on to conclude the essay, writing, "If we may hope for a future, it will belong to such men. A path will then be found even for political and national reconstruction. But whatever may happen, we shall hold our positions, as an essential aspect must be the ideal heritage of those men who not so long ago stood their ground and fought, even knowing that the battle was lost. In any event, without sinking to a lower level, without confusing the essential with the accidental, what may be done will be done." In this conclusion, Evola urges young readers to remember the soldier's mentality as they face the challenges of the post-war age. His advice is not dissimilar to Oswald Spengler's in his book Man and Technics. The message is very much the same, that being, we should do our duties with unflinching conviction even if the world is crumbling around us, simply because that is the heroic thing to do. The main difference, obviously, between Evola and Spengler is that Evola uses the soldiers of the Axis powers as his models for the youth, while Spengler used a Roman legionnaire stationed at Mount Vesuvius. This concludes the analysis part of the video. As part of my concluding thoughts, I will now return to the personal anecdote that I promised to recount. Recall how Evola teaches that correct belief is worthless without correct action. This is perhaps the most important message in the essay, and it is one that has personally impacted my life for the better. When I first read this essay roughly a year and a half ago, my political stances were no different from what they are today, but I certainly did not practice correct action in accordance to my beliefs. I did not have an internal fortitude and frequently relied on cigarettes to calm my nerves as I doom-scrolled Twitter and saw the news. Evola's advice made me realize that I needed to rise above this habit and utilize an internal strength in the face of the vicissitudes of modernity. Today, I do not smoke, and my lung health is exponentially better than it was a year and a half ago. I say this to highlight just why someone, especially young right-wing men or women, should read this essay. Having the correct political ideology does not matter if you do not embody virtue. It is necessary to rise above things like a black-pilled mentality, or in my case, an addiction to cigarettes. Only then can one become the Evolian higher man and constitute a formidable adversary to the excesses of the modern age. This is the point Evola is trying to impart to his readers, and speaking from testimony, it is one that should not be overlooked, particularly if you are a young right-wing individual.